machines in automotive history that have managed to combine raw power, seductive design, and cultural resonance quite like the 1970 Dodge Challenger R/T. At first glance, it's a thunderbolt in sheet metal, low, wide, and menacing, with curves that seduce and a stance that dares you to try and tame it. But this car was more than just a muscle-bound beast born for the quarter mile. It was a symbol. A symbol of rebellion in a time of change. A symbol of what it meant to have freedom under your feet and thunder in your soul. When the Challenger R/T roared onto the scene in 1970, it did more than shake showroom floors. It made people feel alive. It captured a spirit that still lives on today, roaring just as loudly through the veins of enthusiasts, collectors, and dreamers across generations. The 1970 Challenger R/T arrived at the peak of the golden era of muscle cars, a time when horsepower wars were raging, and the streets became battlegrounds for Detroit's finest. Dodge was late to the pony car party. Ford had kicked it off with the Mustang, Chevrolet answered with the Camaro, Pontiac brought the Firebird, and Plymouth had its Barracuda. But Dodge didn't come to play catch-up, it came to dominate. And with the Challenger R/T, they built a car that didn't just compete, it demanded respect. From its bold grille and quad headlights to its long hood and short deck proportions, everything about the Challenger screamed confidence. It was bigger and brawnier than most of its rivals, a machine that seemed carved not from metal, but from pure American ambition. Under the hood, the 1970 Challenger R/T came with a smorgasbord of powertrain options, but the most iconic among them was the legendary 426 HEMI V8. Rated at 425 horsepower, but known to deliver far more in reality, this engine wasn't just powerful, it was mythical. It idled like a caged beast, snarled at the press of a pedal, and launched the Challenger with a fury that felt almost supernatural. For those who wanted muscle but not necessarily full-throttle madness, Dodge offered other potent options like the 446 pack, the 383 Magnum, and even the 340 small block. But it was the HEMI that earned the most street cred, the one whispered about in gas station lore, the one that turned boys into men the moment they dared to floor it. And yet, the 1970 Challenger R/T was more than brute force. It was crafted with a kind of aesthetic flair that made it equally at home parked in front of a diner as it was at a drag strip. The wide, aggressive stance, the rally wheels, the twin-scoop hood, the bold R/T badging, and the high-impact color options, like plum crazy purple, go mango, and sublime, made this car impossible to ignore. Its design wasn't just beautiful, it was unapologetic. It was a rolling billboard for personal expression at a time when the world was shifting, rules were being broken, and culture was rewriting itself in real time. Inside, the Challenger R/T offered a cockpit that was sporty yet comfortable, with high-backed bucket seats, a driver-focused dash, and optional rally gauges that made you feel like you were piloting something important. It wasn't luxurious in the European sense, but it wasn't trying to be. It was built for the road warrior, the weekend racer, the thrill seeker. Everything about the interior was a nod to action, functional, focused, and ready to move. Dodge understood that this car would be more than just a daily driver. It would be part of people's identity. Culturally, the Challenger R/T became a touchstone. It showed up in movies, burned rubber in TV shows, and became a favorite in the muscle car underground. Whether you saw it in Vanishing Point, dreamed about it after reading Hot Rod magazine, or watched your neighbor tear up Main Street on a Saturday night, the image of the Challenger became seared into the national consciousness. It wasn't just a car, it was a legend in motion. It stood for speed, for swagger, for the kind of Americana that you could hear before you saw. And even as the muscle car era began to fade under the weight of rising insurance rates, emission regulations, and fuel crises, the Challenger R/T stood tall, an unbent symbol of what once was. Decades later, its legacy endures. Car lovers from every corner of the globe still dream of owning a 1970 Challenger R/T. Restorations are labors of love. Car meets light up with excitement when one rolls in. And every time that HEMI rumbles to life, it sends shivers down the spine, not just from the sound, but from the story. Because the 1970 Challenger R/T tells a story that is timeless. A story of what happens when passion meets performance. Of what it means to build something not just to sell, but to stir the soul. In an era when cars are increasingly quiet, digital, and antiseptic, the rawness of the Challenger feels like a breath of fresh air. Or maybe a blast of nitrous oxide. It's no surprise that Dodge resurrected the Challenger name in the modern era. Even today's models tip their hats to the legend that started it all in 1970. The retro styling, the aggressive performance, the unapologetic attitude, it all traces back to that original roar. The 1970 R/T didn't just create a model line, it created a movement. And that movement still echoes in garages, racetracks, and highways around the world. Every new Challenger is really just a new chapter in a story that began with that first thunderous V8 fire-up over 50 years ago. So, what made the 1970 Dodge Challenger R/T a legend? It wasn't just the engine. It wasn't just the looks. It was how it made people feel. How it connected with something primal and passionate. How it stood for an era of fearless expression, of pavement-pounding rebellion, and of American ingenuity at full throttle. It wasn't just built, it was unleashed. And even now, more than half a century later, that roar still resonates. It lives in the hearts of those who remember, and in the dreams of those who wish they could have been there to see it rise. The 1970 Challenger R/T isn't just a car, it's a legacy on wheels. A muscle-bound myth that still writes its name in burnouts and broken hearts. And for those lucky enough to drive one, it's not just transportation, it's time travel. Straight back to the golden age of cool. The 1970 Dodge Challenger R/T was born from an era where horsepower reigned supreme, where automakers weren't just building cars, they were building statements. The muscle car boom of the 1960s was in full swing, with each manufacturer trying to outdo the other in speed, style, and swagger. Ford's Mustang kicked off the craze in 1964, followed quickly by the Camaro, Firebird, and Barracuda. Dodge watched from the sidelines, biding its time, studying the field, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when it finally did, it didn't whisper, it roared. The arrival of the Challenger wasn't just another entry into a crowded market. It was Dodge flipping the table and demanding attention. It didn't just follow the muscle car formula, it amplified it. The 1970 redesign of the Challenger was a game-changer. Built on Chrysler's E-body platform, the Challenger was slightly longer and wider than its Plymouth Barracuda sibling, giving it a more commanding presence. It wasn't just aggressive, it was refined. From the front, the wide split grille and inset headlights gave it a snarl that seemed to growl at traffic lights. The lines along the side were sculpted, purposeful, leading the eye back to a pronounced rear end that balanced muscularity with elegance. Dodge didn't just want the Challenger to look good, it wanted it to dominate. And that's exactly what it did. The design spoke of power, but also of control. It was the kind of car you didn't just drive, you wore it like armor. Central to the Challenger's mystique was the R/T package, short for Road/Track. This was not just a badge, it was a promise. The R/T came standard with a 383 cubic inch Magnum V8 engine, beefed up suspension, rally instrumentation, performance tires, and sports striping. The look was unmistakable. Whether it was the power bulge hood, the racing stripes, or the twin exhaust tips, the R/T shouted performance before you even turned the key. Every detail, from the badging to the sound, was engineered to intimidate and impress. Dodge wanted the R/T to be the face of its muscle movement, and with the 1970 Challenger R/T, it had a masterpiece. Pop the hood of the Challenger R/T and you were greeted with a sight that made grown men grin and teenagers dream. The standard 383 Magnum V8 produced a robust 335 horsepower and 425 lb-ft of torque, making it a formidable presence on the street. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about feel. The deep rumble at idle, the instant response when you buried the pedal, the way the car surged forward like it had been struck by lightning. This was muscle in its purest form. But for those who wanted more, Dodge was ready to deliver. Step up to the 440 cubic inch V8, and you were dealing with a different animal altogether. Offered in two variants, the 440 Magnum with a single 4-barrel carburetor, and the 446 pack with 3 2-barrel carburetors, this engine pushed performance into the stratosphere. The 6-pack setup, in particular, delivered 390 horsepower and a staggering 490 lb-ft of torque, making the Challenger one of the fastest cars on the road. It was the kind of power that made tires scream and adrenaline spike. But Dodge still wasn't done. At the top of the mountain sat the legendary 426 HEMI V8. With 425 horsepower and a reputation that far exceeded any dyno sheet, the HEMI was more than an engine, it was a myth in motion. Nicknamed the Elephant for its massive size and incredible power, the 426 HEMI was an engineering marvel. Hemispherical combustion chambers, forged internals, and high-lift camshafts made it a street-legal race engine that required respect and rewarded bravery. Getting behind the wheel of a HEMI-powered Challenger wasn't just about driving, it was about taming a beast. But the Challenger R/T didn't just conquer the streets and tracks. It also became a cultural icon. In the 1971 cult classic film Vanishing Point, a white Challenger R/T becomes the star, tearing across the desert as a symbol of freedom, defiance, and the open road. The movie turned the car into a legend, and every scene it appeared in felt like an homage to velocity itself. From rock album covers to TV shows, the Challenger became shorthand for American cool. It wasn't just a car, it was a lifestyle, a rolling embodiment of the anti-establishment spirit that defined the era. American car culture embraced the Challenger with open arms. Cruising down Main Street in a plum-crazy R/T with a pistol-grip shifter wasn't just transportation, it was theater. It was identity. For many, the Challenger was the first car they truly loved, the first car they modified, the first car they raced, or simply the one that lived on their bedroom wall as a poster dream. Collectors today still chase after original models, restoring them with painstaking care, preserving a piece of history that can still quicken the pulse of anyone who hears that unmistakable growl. As the years passed and the muscle car era waned, the Challenger never faded from memory. In fact, its legacy only grew stronger. The nameplate was resurrected in the 2000s, and once again Dodge proved that it understood what the Challenger meant. The modern iterations may have added airbags, traction control, and infotainment systems, but the DNA was untouched. Long hood, short deck, massive V8 under the hood, aggressive styling, and a drive that stirred the soul. The reborn Challenger was a tribute, a celebration, and a continuation of the legend. It reminded the world that muscle cars weren't dead, they were just waiting for the right time to roar again. Even now, the Challenger continues to inspire. The Hellcat, the Red Eye, the Superstock, each new variant pushes boundaries while tipping its hat to the 1970 R/T. In a world of turbocharged four-cylinders and electric crossovers, the Challenger stands tall like a monument to horsepower. It's not the most practical. It's not the most efficient. But that's the point. It's about heart. It's about soul. It's about reminding us that driving should be an experience, not just a task. And through it all, the 1970 Challenger R/T remains the benchmark. It's the origin of a legend that refuses to be forgotten. A car born in a golden age of muscle and molded into myth by the hands of time, passion, and fire-breathing performance. It continues to echo through the decades, not just in sound, but in spirit. The muscle car may have evolved, but the roar of the 1970 Challenger R/T still thunders across every open road, every drag strip, every car show, and every memory of those who were lucky enough to hear it firsthand. This isn't just history, it's horsepower. It's legacy. And most of all, it's a reminder that some legends never die, they just shift into gear and keep driving. The 1970 Dodge Challenger R/T isn't just a muscle car, it's a living, breathing embodiment of American automotive passion. It represents more than just raw horsepower and aggressive styling. It captures a moment in time when boldness, freedom, and rebellion were forged into steel and rubber. Its arrival during the golden era of muscle cars wasn't an accident, it was destiny. The Challenger R/T was Dodge's statement to the world, an exclamation of intent, performance, and individuality. Decades later, it still holds that power. It's not just admired, it's revered. It's not simply remembered, it's celebrated. From its unmistakable roar to its unmistakable silhouette, the 1970 Challenger R/T carved its name into the asphalt of history with the fury of a street-born legend, and that name has never faded. This machine wasn't built to fade into the background. It was made to lead, to race, to be felt in the chest and seen in the rearview mirror as a symbol of dominance. Its legacy lies not only in its incredible specs or menacing design, but in how it made people feel. It gave muscle car fans a sense of identity, of pride, of excitement that transcended the ordinary. And today, that legacy is alive and thriving. Whether in perfectly restored original form or reimagined in the form of modern beasts like the Hellcat and Superstock, the Challenger R/T lives on, not just as a classic car, but as a cornerstone of what American performance is all about. For anyone who calls themselves a car enthusiast, understanding the 1970 Challenger R/T is essential. This isn't just nostalgia, it's respect for the roots of a genre that has shaped the automotive landscape. We're talking about a machine that influenced design language, inspired movies and music, and sparked a deep, lasting love among collectors and gearheads. If you've ever felt the rumble of a V8 under your feet, if you've ever turned your head at the sound of a muscle car idling at a red light, then part of you already understands the magic of the Challenger. It's time we give it the appreciation it deserves, not just as a cool old car, but as a symbol of an era where cars had character, attitude, and soul. As we look toward the future, a future that seems to be moving toward electrification and efficiency, the spirit of the Challenger remains a guiding light. Automakers are already exploring how to carry the legacy of muscle into a new age, and you can be sure that the soul of the 1970 R/T will be there, echoing in every performance car that dares to be bold. The Challenger's story isn't over. It's evolving. And just like in 1970, it's leading the charge. It dares us to be loud, to be different, to leave a mark. That's the power of the Challenger. It was born to roar, and it still does.